Number one, we're in chapter 13 today. Also, sorry, let me just let people in. Also, please remember that week 4 opened up on this past Friday. So that means that you have access to everything for the week, including your final and final project. Um, Everything for week 3 and week 4, with the exception of what's due on Thursday, will close this Wednesday. Hard stop, guys. It will close this Wednesday, just like everything from week 2 closed on this Sunday. So everything from week 3 will close this Wednesday. Everything for this week will also close this Wednesday. That's why we opened it up on Friday. Please make sure you try to get everything done. Please, please, please. I cannot make any exceptions with that. All grades are due Thursday, so I don't even have any wiggle room myself. So we're all up under the same gun. We have to get it done. All right. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about just getting started with your new job. And in chapter 13, the first thing it talks about is this concept called imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome has everything to do with now that many of us, myself included, it always happens. You know so much, right? Sometimes you don't even realize how much you know, but you don't feel like you know it because you haven't applied it, right? So it's like when you graduate from anything, if you haven't applied what you've known, you don't know how well you know it or if you can do it. In reality, you know a lot. You know a lot, just as much as everybody else. Just because you haven't applied all of your knowledge, it doesn't mean that you aren't knowledgeable. So just know that when you start your new job, you know just as much as everybody else. They just have more experience doing it than you. So we want you to go in there confident. When chapter 13, it just reminds you that, we all get really excited when we first get our job, but there's some basic things that you're going to have to take care of when you first start. And so we're going to talk about those things, but we're also going to talk about this concept of professionalism. Professionalism is something that we hear a lot, right? We always hear people say, be professional. That person is a professional. What is the difference between a professional and a non-professional? Sometimes we just expect anybody that has a job to be professional, but then there's a specific caveat, a category of people where they consider them professionals. And so we'll talk about that. I know that may sound confusing, but let's just go back to the beginning. So we know that when we get this new job, it's not just a new job, right? It's the new job of our new career, which, adds more anxiety. And so there's a couple of things that you're going to have to do. 9 times out of 10, you're going into a corporate environment. Even though you're in trades, you're still working for a corporation. So it's still going to be structured like a corporation. Some of the companies that you work for will be very corporate. Let me just tell you now. Let's say you go work for like, Taylor Morrison or some type of, real estate that's going to be very, very corporate, as opposed to you, going to work for just a mom and pop or a small business. They may not be as corporate. So when you go to that job, either one, especially if it's very corporate, make sure you bring all your documentation. The law states that anytime a company hires you, they have 72 hours. They have 3 days to report new employees. That's the law. So if you ever wonder why a company freaks out, when they say, hey, I need you to fill out this I-9 and this W-4 form, it is because they have 3 days to get it to the federal government. So they won't, the federal government won't say, oh, you're paying somebody underneath the table. You know how that goes, because they have to pay taxes. So the government wants to make sure that they have a record of all new employees. So make sure that you have everything that you need, your 2 forms of ID or whatever else it is, with you when you first start the job. Like, don't be that person that goes, oh, I can't fill this out now because I didn't bring any ID with me. Like, you should know to bring it. So if your mom has your social security card, we're not judging. Get your social security card or your your birth certificate, or whatever you need to make sure that you bring those things with you, because especially in a corporate environment, they're very structured. 3 days to get that turned in. That's the law. Also, they may have some benefits, and we'll talk about that in a minute, that you have to fill out. Now, the first bullet here goes without saying. We know, please don't be that person to show up late. Like, we've talked about subjective elements and how people will just judge you. It's true. I'm sorry. Like, I don't remember a lot, but I remember starting a new job, and I remember the people that showed up late in orientation. I don't know why that is. It's not like I'm a petty person. It's just that everybody has anxiety, right? So that's the first day of your job. So everybody remembers everything. Remember, we talked about those senses are all on alert. So you don't want to be that person. I remember starting a new job, and we actually, was a few of us that started the new job, and the person was late, and I saw the CEO's eyes kind of like, stretch a little. I was like, uh-oh, he took mental note of that person being late. Like, you just don't want to be late, right? Be very nice, greet everyone, be positive. I know some of our natural our personalities are a little different. Like, I know for me, I tend to recoil when I'm around people I don't know. So I'm an introvert by nature. So I'm not as friendly when I meet new people. I try to find the nearest exit or somewhere just right in the outskirts of the crowd, because that's just my personality. But you know yourself, so just take a mental note. Try to be as personable as possible. It's your first day. Like, you don't want to get labeled. Everybody's checking everybody out. Y'all know how it goes. And reputations grow very, very quickly. If you are a remote worker, and this could apply to many of you that may be on the road, when you do travel, make sure you know where you're going, where orientation is going to be, especially for those of us that may be at job sites. You may have to go to the corporate office. Make sure that you understand what you're supposed to do and where you're supposed to go on that first day. Very, very important. Now, what is going to happen typically, especially in corporate environments, is if anyone's ever had a corporate job, we're just assuming everyone's different. Some of us may not. This may be our first. Anticipate new hire training. Now, new hire training, and it could be a half an hour. No, not half a day. It could be for 2 weeks. I know. I had a job where my first day, they sat me down at a computer, and I think I took like 3 tests. It was like 3 hours long. I almost died. I was like, I'm going to just pull my hair out. Like, y'all could have told me I wouldn't have even gotten dressed in my Sunday best if I knew I was just going to be sitting down at a computer for 3 hours. Can you imagine? Right? So that's something else you can ask the screener. Remember when I said to you, if you do get a job offer, it's going to be from HR, and depending on how friendly that person is, not to say that you can't ask if they're not friendly, but use your judgment. Sometimes people can be persnickety and not want to talk. They may just have a lot of people to get through. But if you can ask, also the first couple of days we'll be doing orientation, I just want to know how to prepare. Sometimes to bring a granola bar, you just never know. I'm just saying, right? You just never know what you're going to be dealing with, but you will have some type of new hire training, right? And this actually is good in the sense that this is your opportunity to speak one-on-one with HR. HR, they're very, very busy. Most times HR are training, they're hiring, or they're firing. That's what they're doing. They're doing payroll, right? That's what they do. So, this is your opportunity to work, to engage with HR, and to get all of your questions answered. So to that point, chapter 13, it kind of lists out the different types of questions you can ask. Again, we're so nervous sometimes we forget what we need to ask, but some basic stuff may be important, i.e., my hours, not even just my hours, but the hours of the building. Some of us may have to go and clock in. Some of us may have to stop by work. Is it open on Saturdays? Maybe you have the type of job that you have to work on the weekends. Like, you don't have to ask all these different questions, but if these questions are important to you, just this is the time to ask, right? This is your one-on-one. This is your wedding day. This is the one day that HR is all about you. So take your time. Don't rush through this process and say to yourself, I'll just, worry about getting these questions answered once I start. Let me tell you this. A lot of times, one mistake you don't want to make, guys, don't get on your job and start discussing anything personal with your peers. That includes benefits, pay. Definitely don't ever talk about pay. Because remember, you negotiated your pay and they negotiated their pay. And that's one of the reasons why you're not supposed to talk about pay, because y'all may have negotiated two different things based on your experience, right? So please keep your pay to yourself. A lot of times people will try to sneak and ask questions about pay because maybe they felt that they weren't treated right or they came in under a different supervisor. Please try to steer away from those types of conversations. And more importantly, their situation is different. They could have their spouse's benefits. They don't know anything about the benefit program. Your supervisor doesn't want to talk to you about HR related stuff. So when you have the time to have HR 100% focused on you, that's typically during orientation. Ask those questions, security questions, badge questions, overtime, where do I park, all those types of things. Make sure you get those questions answered during your orientation as much as you can, right? Try to get those questions answered. Whatever questions you may have, right? Do I have to clock in and out? Is there a system? Sometimes people have software systems that you clock in and out on. Sometimes you have to have a manual system. So just try, your best to get those questions answered. Now, we all have our new job, right? We have these social platforms. A lot of people ask, like, when do I congratulate myself and let the world know that I have a new job? It's up to you. Some people wait the 90 days to see if this is the type of job they want. Some people can't wait 90 days. Some people do it right away. Hey, I have a new job. Some people wait until they feel comfortable to make sure it's where they want to stay. I say use your discretion, but just remember that your social platform, especially when it comes to LinkedIn, it's a little different from like Instagram personal type accounts, right? So I wouldn't, me personally, want to, because what happens too is once you put a company on your LinkedIn, not that it's a big deal, but sometimes people search that company and LinkedIn will give it, references to different people that work at that company. And you don't really want people reaching out to you or trying to connect with you, because there will be people that will try to connect with you once you put that you're part of a company. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. That's what LinkedIn is all about, is to create these professional networks. But, it's really not a good look for you to put a company up and have to take it down, put them up, take it down. Not that you will, but, that's just life. Not everybody stays at a company that they start. I know I haven't. I mean, it hasn't happened a lot, but for sure, I've worked at companies and it wasn't a good fit and I went somewhere else. And then too, watch this. When you're in the interviewing process, you may have one or two companies that you're interested in, but maybe this company was your second option, but they reached out to you first. So you were thinking your first option was off the table. And then lo and behold, they call you up 3 weeks later and tell you, oh, we're so sorry, we had a pause, blah, blah, blah. This is one of the reasons why I say it's important to stay connected, especially to opportunities that you want. And they said, we were really going to choose you, and you've been at this job for a couple of weeks and you're thinking, oh, yeah, I knew this wasn't going to be a good fit. Within the first 90 days, That's not a marriage. That's y'all just dating. So you can definitely leave. Trust me, if they don't like you, they will get rid of you within 90 days. So this is business. This is not personal. Nobody's going to judge you. You don't even have to put that on your resume. Some people, if they haven't been on a job for more than a year, they don't even put it on their resume. I mean, there's no hard science. You can do whatever you want, but just know, like, when do you update your profile? Use your discretion, but just be mindful of those things. A big part of being in a professional career is that, one, you're working in a corporate environment. Two, most corporate environments use what we call performance evaluations. Who's had a performance evaluation? Give me a thumbs up if you've had one. These are okay. So I won't say I have two experiences, but I got my first experience with a performance evaluation in the military, and I liked it because it's very, obviously the military is a super, super efficient, industry. So their performance evaluations are going to be very structured, and I worked in HR. So it was a very, 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 very structured process. It was important in any form of government, these performance evaluations, because they follow you. 20, 30 years ago, people would even ask to see your performance evaluation when you went to a separate company, especially if you work in government of any sort. They'll ask to see your previous performance evaluation. It's a formal process. A really good performance evaluation process will start right at orientation. I've been fortunate, even outside of the military, to have worked for some really good companies that had very formal structure systems. Now, I like that because I am a tell me what I'm doing, tell me how it's done type of person. I need to know how things are done because I like to do things the right way, right? So when I worked, at companies with doing performance evaluations, that really should start right at orientation. During orientation is typically where you will meet the CEO. Most companies have, a meet the CEO day, or they'll come and they'll lay out for you their vision for the institution. It doesn't always happen. Maybe you won't meet the person until your first conference or something. But most companies, even if it's, hey, watch this video, will have this is what we're all about conversation, right? So let's say you work for I don't know, Lennar Homes, and it's real estate. You get that. Here is what we're trying to do in America, across America, wherever they build homes. And then what will happen after that, so that is their mission, their vision. Then they'll tell you what their strategic vision is, right? So they'll say, okay, for the next 5 years, here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to incorporate, the Internet of Things, IT into everything, our refrigeration, our stoves, our alarm systems, whatever they're trying to do, right? And so here is where you come in at. So a really good company will start with the vision of the company. They'll go down to the strategic vision and where you fit into that. That's very, very important because it is going to relay back to your performance evaluation. Now, a super efficient company will then have your supervisor within those first 60 days say to you, okay, Thomas, you've heard our vision. You see what we're doing strategically for the next 3 to 5 years. Here is what your tasks are going to be that relate to that goal. Because we are trying to expand into a new market, your team is going to be tasked with, working with these projects, and we have a 6-month hard deadline of getting everything done for these new homes. We need to have a 95% error-free rate. Let's say whether you're in welding, HVAC, or electrical, the part that you're working on your team with, that means no errors. We can't keep going back in, fixing. So we need to write no more than 2 corrections per project, right? And I'm just speaking, new home building, because I used to do that, right? So, that could be your marching orders, and they'll tell you, okay, you're going to be evaluated on, how many, 95% and overs that you get in per quarter, right? So what does that do? That lets you know, okay, so this is how they're going to judge me, right? That's important for you to know. Nobody wants to go to a job and now you're at the mercy of this supervisor. Oh, do they like me? Do they don't like me? Should I bring him donuts? Like, everybody hates that, right? And it is a telltale sign for you too, because you're a professional. So you want to be evaluated professionally. You want to be treated professionally. They expect you to deal with their work professionally. Remember, code of conduct, code of ethics. So it's a reciprocation. You expect them to also act in a professional manner. You should know what the performance evaluation process is. There should be no surprises. At the end of the year, you should be able to tabulate how well you've done. You should not be at the mercy of a supervisor saying, oh, do I like Thomas? If you know those are telltale signs, it's like being in a bad relationship. You need to be on high alert, because this is your career. You don't want to just hang your hat anywhere, and it can affect you. At the end of the year, in a super efficient company will even have a mid-year review, right? But I don't want to put too much pressure on these companies, and you go out there and you start saying, ooh, dude, I don't want you being too snooty and say, this is not what Ms. Taylor talked about, because most of them won't have it. I would say it depends on where you work, but if you know that you are a very structured type of person and you like those environments, maybe that'll let you say, okay, well, I kind of like where Ms. Taylor is going because that is my personality. Let me make sure I do work for a more corporate environment, because I like that structure, right? I like knowing exactly what's expected of me, how you're going to evaluate me. You're telling me, if you get a 7 or higher on your evaluation, most times it's like 10 points. If you get a 7 or higher, I'm going to get a 3% raise and could be offered a promotion. I need to know that. I need to know that. Does that not make sense? Tell me if that makes sense. You need to know that on day one. Don't tell me 6 months in how you're evaluating me. Or more importantly, one of these smaller companies, they wait till the end of the year and be like, hey, fill out this paper. Run if you're in that type of environment, because now that means you're totally at the mercy of how somebody feels about you. Who wants to work in that environment, right? I don't want to be friends with my supervisor. If we are, that's just, that just happens to be, we just happen to have good personalities together. But at the end of the day, I have a goal. My long-term strategy was saying, I'm just here for 3 years anyway. So I'm not trying to be your friend, because I don't want you to even think that, right? People are not everybody's professional, guys. You're going to learn that, right? Some of you already know. So when you have that long-term goal, you have it in mind, stay focused, right? We all know there's going to be workplace etiquette. Chapter 13 talks about that, what to do, what not to do. All of this has to do with a good professional goes in, scopes out the place, when in Rome, do as the Romans do. Every company has a corporate culture and a corporate climate. So the culture could be, oh, they're laid back, it's not intense, which affects the climate, whether people, nobody trusts anyone, or everybody's out for themselves, because that's just the climate. Now, I'll tell you that CEO kind of sets that culture and climate. So if you ever walk into an environment and it's really, really toxic, it's either coming from the very top or the very bottom, that first line supervisor or the CEO, because people don't just act that way. They act that way according to the culture and the climate, right? So you also need to have that in the back of your mind. That's another reason why those first 90 days are so important, right? If you know you don't thrive in certain environments, then hey, get out quick, especially if you have other options, right? I'm not telling you to pop from job to job. I'm saying make sure the position that you're going for is in alignment with what you want, because this is so important, guys. This is your career. And you don't just want to say, I'm just going to hold my nose and just, work through the mess until I can do better, right? You know, unless that is your rock bottom, rock bottom. But the good news about being a professional is that you're not at the bottom. You have options now. That's why you go to school, so you can have options, right? The more skill you have, the more options you have. Yes, that it is true. It is true. Don't get too bougie, but that is true. So the more skill you have, the more options you have. So you don't just have to just take it, right? You know, there's a lot of people. The more skilled you are, there's more options you have. That more people want you. So you can set some parameters for yourself. Another thing that you'll deal with, especially in all of your fields, is safety. Y'all already know when you go to training, in addition to all this orientation stuff, you're going to be doing a lot of workplace training. You're going to start out in those orientation talking about training. You're going to be safety. You're going to talk about safety. You're going to get all kinds of inspections. You already know it. You already know it. So, be on high alert, and be ready for that, and just know that you're all of you are going into fields where safety is going to be important. All right. Guess what? That's it. I'm trying to get y'all out of here, y'all. My friends, your assignment for today is an ethical question. Your conference question for today, very simple. I just want to know, what is your biggest first day anxiety? We all have them. We all have it. All right. What's your big first day anxiety? There are a few people that have not done their mock interviews. I know some of you had to reschedule. Please get that done. Wednesday is the hard stop. If you have not turned in that resume, please get that done. Wednesday is the hard stop. The resume is the only thing I will continue to accept from week 2, because that's not in your hands, right? Obviously, some of your campuses were a bit late on that, and that's okay. That's not your fault. Other than that, my friends, have a great Monday, and I will see you guys back here tomorrow. All right? Have a great day, guys. Bye-bye.